think this is the topping of the cake for the evening. Then I think Suparna has already described elaborately the newfound entity of COVID-associated hyperinflammatory syndrome. So before we go off to the panel, just to give a flavor about these patients, so I'll be presenting two cases that we happen to encounter over the last 15 days. So I'll start off with just a case presentation of two cases that I happen to encounter. So the first case was an 8-year-old girl who presented with high intermittent fever, 102 to 103 degrees Fahrenheit, with headache for the last 3 days. There was some erythematous, non-blanching, non-itchy rashes over the hands and trunk that subsequently involved the periorbital region. And there were persistent non-bilious vomiting, loose stools, and epigastric abdominal pain for the last 2 days. So this was the presentation. So you can see the rashes, a little unusual looking rashes over the palms and soles. And so this was one of the things that this rash on the finger, which attracted my attention initially, the classical Thiel-Van-Dyke rash that we were encountering, the pictures that we are seeing from Italy. And this was a child, the rashes have now involved the trunk, the extremities, and you can see the non-purulent bulbar conjunctivitis along with some periorbital puffiness. So the child had on admission tachycardic, the child was tachycardic, she was otherwise stable, the blood pressure was normal, just the epigastrium was tender and the liver was 2.5 centimeter. So she was admitted in the isolation ward and a COVID-19 RT-PCR was sent. And if you look at a series of investigations, so she was admitted on the 3rd. There's a neutrophilic leukocytosis. The neutrophils are very high, and the CRP is unusually high, 362 milligrams per liter of CRP. And she had also a hyponatremia. The investigations repeated after 2 days showed that she was, of course, put on broad spectrum IV antibiotics. Since scrub happens to be quite common in this part of the country, she was also put on doxycycline. But 48 hours, the fevers continued, the loose motion continued, and she continued to have very high fever and very high CRP. You can see the CRP is still hanging around 300. And what was another thing, that the platelets were not very high. The platelets were in almost the normal range, and the sodium was always persistently low. So now in the meantime, the COVID-19 PCR came to be negative. She was shifted to the ward, and what was noticed that she had a persistent tachycardia. She was a disproportionate tachycardic, and even in the sleeping pulse rate was high. So that was something which was unusual, and that was what made us think that is she having an underlying myocarditis. And so she was asked for an echocardiography, and the cardiac enzymes were also ordered. You can see that the NT-proBNP was sky high, 13,343. The D-dimer was also high, and also procal was high. And the echocardiography showed an ejection fraction of around 45%, and the LMCS-Z score was just +2. So you can see the just dilated coronaries over here. So Dr. Anil Singh, who did the echocardiography, was kind enough to share the picture with me. So now we were almost certain that we are dealing with a hyperinflammatory syndrome. IVIG was initiated at 2 grams per kg along with low dose aspirin. And at this time, the child also started having hypotension. So the child was shifted to the intensive care in the middle of the night, and inotropes were started. But there was a dramatic change within 12 hours. She became afebrile, the BP started improving. Within 24 hours, the inotropes could be weaned off, and the tachycardia also gradually subsided over the next 36 hours. So a repeat echocardiography after 48 hours, the ejection fraction has gone up to 60%, but the coronaries, there's a marginal dilatation of the coronaries, has gone up to plus 2.5. And an antibody test also was sent, and you can see that the COVID antibody was strongly positive. So this was our first patient. Around the same time, a second patient was also admitted in the intensive care unit. So this was shared by Dr. Prabhash Prashun-Giri, who's a pediatric intensivist. I'm thankful to Prabhash for sharing this case with me. So this is a 15-year-old boy who presented with fever for 8 days, rash all over the body for the 5 days, again redness of the eyes and vomiting. So you can see the redness of the eyes, very marked conjunctivitis, non-purulent bulbar conjunctivitis again. The rashes, dark skin, I think that it's not very visible, but you can make out some of the rashes over here. So on admission, the big child was otherwise stable, and the investigation again picked up a very high CRP. So a very high CRP is one of the markers of this condition, a disproportionately elevated CRP. Even in KD patients, we do not usually encounter a CRP of this magnitude. And the platelets, you can see, they are almost not very elevated. And the sodium was again on the lower side. So COVID-19 RT-PCR was negative, and echo showed dilated coronaries. You can see the LMC of plus 2.4, and LAD had a Z-score of plus 3.3, so which is almost like a small aneurysm. And ejection fraction was 56%. So this child was a big child, not coming from a very well-to-do family. So the child was just administered 1 gram per kg of IVIG along with methylprednisolone 10 mg per kg for 3 days and low dose aspirin. So repeat echo after 72 hours, similar findings, but the child definitely improved. The fever subsided, the inflammatory parameters came down, and the child was discharged. Both the children, in fact, were discharged with low dose aspirin with follow-up, with advice for follow-up echocardiography after 15 days. So, but this child was antibody negative. So we had 2 patients, almost similar presentations. One was antibody positive and the other was antibody negative. So over to, I think, Dhrupjyoti now.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. So I think one of the most important things about these patients is making a clinical diagnosis, a clinical decision, and thinking about the diagnosis. So although Suparna has mentioned it in her, but I would again request you to say what would make you think of this diagnosis.
Exactly, sir. So actually, most of the things so nicely elaborated by you, sir, and Madam, and also Amitabh, sir. So nothing is left for me. I am just learning from you. And as a part of discussion, I have to repeat several of the things. And Madam already had highlighted very important points. So every time we receive new data, it either helps us to learn something new or give rise to even more questions. So what is this PMIS? So several other names, it has several other names like multi-system inflammatory syndrome of children. So hyperinflammatory shock in children. So in your cases, these 2 cases, the first case 8 years child, male child, and suddenly deteriorated during the hospital stay. Second child is 15 years, had prominent GI manifestation. I think these are very important telltale signs for suspecting this pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome in association with COVID-19. So how to suspect a case with this syndrome? So this syndrome should be considered in children presenting with fever without an explanatory alternative diagnosis and any of the following. That means after initial resolution of known or highly suspected COVID-19 infection or recent, that means less than 4 weeks of COVID-19 exposure. There is a duration, the lag period, that is as you have already highlighted, and systemic illnesses with signs of shock or significant abdominal symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain. So these all, I think, help us to suspect this syndrome. And this has been already nicely described in the case definitions by CDC and WHO. But again, all patients with this syndrome do not develop shock, and not all patients have features of complete KD or incomplete KD. So how a pediatric multisystem inflammatory syndrome is different from KD in pre-COVID era? This also Madam has already told, but again I want to repeat it, highlighting important points. KD is most common in children less than 5 years, but PMIS is more common in older children and adolescents. And KD is common in children of Asian ancestry. However, PMIS is more common in children of blacks and Hispanics. In KD children, we do not primarily, this children with KD usually primarily do not present with abdominal symptoms, and shock is very, very rare phenomena. However, in PMIS, there's rapid deterioration with the development of shock and multisystem dysfunction in a previously healthy site. That is very important. Site is previously healthy and suddenly deteriorated. And abdominal complaints are very prominent. So in investigations, early development of lymphopenia and thrombocytopenia and marked elevation of the D-dimers and serum ferritin levels. In Kawasaki disease, lymphopenia is usually not seen. And we can see thrombocytopenia on occasional side in the first week of illness. So these are not common in the Kawasaki disease. And the extreme end, the PMIS has shock and multi-organ dysfunction. So another phenomena in relation to PMIS is the cytokine storm syndrome. This occurs following stimulation of the innate immune system by an infectious agent. Here it is the SARS-CoV-2 virus that lead to uncontrolled release of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, that is interleukin 1B, interleukin 6, TNF alpha. This is like macrophage activation syndrome. This is also another example of cytokine storm. So out of this, the interleukin 6, I think, responsible for most of the clinical manifestations, including fever. So cytokine storm syndrome is usually present with high grade of fever, rash, coagulopathy is there, and neurological signs, with some progressing to multiple organ dysfunction syndrome and subsequently death. So in laboratory features, we get thrombocytopenia, lymphopenia, increased transaminase levels, elevated D-dimer, LDH, coagulation time will be prolonged, and CRP will be very high, as you have said. And serum ferritin is very high. That is similar to macrophage activation syndrome, which is another example of this cytokine storm, as I have told. So the important observations are patients can initially be well appearing with reassuring laboratory workups, only to return to the hospital days later with worsening symptoms and repeat clinical deterioration. Though the clinical picture suggests, it is unclear at this time whether it is more typical of KD, what we have seen in pre-COVID era, or it is in association with SARS-CoV-2. In an analysis of the data from New York, UK, Italy, and France, total number of children 142, that showed 63% of children had positive serology and negative PCR. 63%. Negative PCR, positive serology. So then 30% had positive for both, and only 8% had negative for both. That means it can be negative. As you have said, sir, it can be negative or it can be positive. And as it is an inflammatory immune reaction, so most of the time we get PCR negative. That is also right. So I think these are the very important issues we can suspect from that, and other issues like treatment we can discuss in the treatment sections. Thank you, sir.
Dhruvjyoti, will you say a word or two about a macrophage activation syndrome? Because we all have heard that some of these patients can go into macrophage activation syndrome. So just for the general listeners, so when do you suspect, and being a rheumatologist, I think you are one of the very, very well versed on macrophage. So we'd like to hear from you, just when would you suspect a mass in these patients?
Okay, sir. Sir, actually, macrophage activation syndrome, the older name was hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, that was coined by hematologists. And since 2002 onward, we are that remote, that is seen that it is same. That means HLS or MAS, it is the same disease. So, but MAS we consider in the rheumatological points of view, that means associated with systemic JI or other rheumatological illnesses. And SLS is a broad term, can be infection, can be malignancy, can be rheumatological illness, can be some genetic background. So suppose, for example, in this COVID-19 infection, now before that I want to give examples of systemic JIA, what we see in the pediatric rheumatology. So a child with systemic JIA will have leukocytosis, will have very high thromboplatelet count, maybe say million, more than million, high CRP, high ESR. So this is the clinical picture, and serum ferritin level may be high. So here, once the child start developing macrophage activation syndrome, the platelet counts, the clinical syndrome, that is fever, is one of the important point in systemic JI. So initial contagion fever, that means intermittent fever, become persistent. That is a very important sign. Persistence of fever, then sudden drop in the platelet count, and very high CRP level, and drop in the ESR. These are the very important signs of development of macrophage activation syndrome. Though there is a criteria, that means the classification criteria for that, but this criteria is not useful for clinical diagnosis. That is for research purpose only. So I will not go into the criteria. Like that, in infection associated HLS, like in SARS-19, we get a similar picture what we have described in the cytokine storm. There will be drop in the platelet count, drop in the ESR, very, very high serum ferritin level, maybe say more than 10,000. And ESR will be down. We can get a high D-dimer level. Clinically, again, the fever will be persistent. Another point is that we get maybe get jaundice, coagulopathy, and neurological symptoms like seizure. So like that, we can suspect macrophage activation syndrome. But I think it is very difficult in a case of cytokine storm syndrome to discriminate clinically whether it is purely macrophage activation syndrome or HLS, or it is a cytokine storm syndrome, because pathophysiologically both are same.
Okay. What I have always encountered in macrophage activation is the sudden change in the neurological features.
Exactly.
Especially in patients of systemic arthritis. They suddenly develop some amount of encephalopathy. So I think that is one of the most important clinical pointers in picking up a patient with macrophage activation. So presently then we'll ask now Amitabh, the cardiologist, to give his input regarding these patients of PIMS. So Amitabh, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So when will you do the echocardiography? And then what are the usual findings that you can expect? So just share with us.
Yes, Priyankar, I would just like to share one of our patients who our intensive Dr. Shubhadeep has actually managed. This is a very, very similar patient, the two which presented. This patient came, the father was a police officer, and he presented in a very bad shape with anasarca, pedal edema, edema of the hands, and facial puffiness. Not put in a state of shock with abdominal swelling, and there was gross function on echocardiogram with enlarged coronary arteries. Not aneurysmal, I would say. All the patients which we have seen a total of 5 patients. 4 were from peripheral centers sent by Dr. Praveen Bhowmik, but I'm not sure whether the tests were done on them, because none of them had elevated platelets, but all of them had coronary artery changes. And the one which was admitted in a state of shock in our hospital under Dr. Shubhadeep and ours, that particular child had edema all over and was severe dysfunction with enlarged coronary arteries. And present in a state of shock, obviously in the PICU setup, he was given inotropic therapy, after reducing agents, diabetic therapy, ventilated, and thereafter, not ventilated, this patient was not ventilated, and thereafter gradually the child turned around in about 5 days of time. And the child was discharged on about 8th day. And after 1 month, when we saw, it was very, very surprising. Within a period of 1 month, I was surprised that the coronary diameters have actually come down to normal. So unfortunately, in this particular patient, we had done a COVID-19 test, which was negative, but unfortunately, the antibody testing was not available at that point of time. So we're planning on the next follow-up, we do antibody test if they are still present inside the body. So unfortunately, that patient was not there. Now the fact is, since this kind of patients are usually presenting with a very high fever, but not all of them presented with shock. Only a few, one or two of them presented with shock. Most of them were managed in the peripheral centers with conservative management, and the one which was admitted to us did present with the shock. The most notorious findings on echocardiogram from the cardiologist perspective was there was fluid everywhere, including pericardial effusion, dysfunction, mild amount of valvulitis, and coronary artery changes. These are the echocardic findings. And the clinical findings we have discovered. And we have said already, with hypotension, there was sinus tachycardia, no other arrhythmias we have noted. The sinus tachycardia, one or two ectopic beats were noted, but no other sinus tachycardia. And the laboratory parameters were just as described by you. So this, from the cardiologist perspective, very luckily, the patients which we have encountered, they all have recovered. And they have taken an average span of about 2 weeks to 4 weeks for the cardiological recovery. Obviously, the body became less swell and the water came out and the water was extracted with strong amount of diuretics, and thereafter, approximately about 4 weeks, they all recovered. We haven't made any death. Luckily, we haven't seen any death in this particular disease so far. We haven't seen.
So I think that was good that you have diagnosed and managed it appropriately. So just say something about the inotropes that you'd like to give to these children.
Yes, since we are in a cardiological setup, so our first choice of inotropes was to keep up blood pressure. We use noradrenaline. To keep up the peripheral perfusion, we use milrinone. Obviously, noradrenaline was supplemented with adrenaline. These were the three main tests which we used with a very high dose of diuretics. We use the diuretics with including furosemide, aldactone, and metoprolol. Other thing which we did was we didn't take help of pediatric for diet in this particular case, and we decreased the input to almost about 70%. And that way we were able to take out almost cumulatively, we took about 4 to 5 liters of water from the child over a span of about 96 hours. That's approximately 4 days. And that turned around the patient with a huge amount of that, gave the myocardium quite a bit of rest. And later on, we discharged the child on oral furosemide, enalapril as an reducing agent, and aldactone. These are the three things we have used.
Doctor, can I add a point?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Go ahead.
Amitav, I think
Yes.
these PIMS patients, they actually respond well to your therapy, I think. Though I have not experienced any, fortunate of experiencing any to deal with such patient, but I think that these patients respond well to therapy, like your coronaries, they reverse quickly compared to the typical KD child.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes. Surprisingly, the coronaries came back with
Yes, that is also what happened to Priyanka's patient, he said.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
definitely.
The coronaries reverted to normal.
Yes. So I think we have Dr. Snehal over here.
Yes,
I believe she's
Good
from.
evening, ma'am.
She's from.
Yeah, hello, Amitav.
Ma'am, good evening.
Yeah, hello. I'm Dr. Snehal Kulkarni, senior pediatric cardiologist from Mumbai and currently president of Pediatric Cardiac Society of India. In fact, I'm looking at all the data from Mumbai, and we have involved 4 major centers. And till now, we have 23 patients from 4 centers who had this PIMS symptoms and presentations. We involved the WHO criteria for enrollment into this particular group of patients. Our age was 7.2, median age was, and the range was from 5.7 to 9.4. 15 patients out of that, almost 70% of the patients presented with myocarditis-like symptoms with reduced left ventricular function and hemodynamic instability. 4 patients out of that had significant features like Kawasaki, including coronary artery dilatation, that becomes around 11%. And when we looked at the literature, I think coronary involvement is in around 9% of patients in most of the series, and we have around 11% of patients. All the patients who presented with myocarditis, we have given them IVIG 2 gram per kg, and all patients include, in our 23 patients, we had 1 mortality for the child who was 12-year-old who came with almost shock-like symptoms, severe myocardial dysfunction, and we could not revive the child. 3 patients who had significantly dilated coronary. In addition to steroids, we have given tocilizumab with complete improvement and recovery of the coronaries to normalcy. In fact, we have written this, all our data to Indian Pediatrics, and it's in the process of publication. And in fact, we have seen that map of Mumbai, where Mumbai has multiple zones, where the prevalence of COVID is more in particular areas where the slums and other things are much more. And they are trying to correlate these patients' populations from which particular zone they are coming, and trying to correlate that with the zones where the prevalence of the COVID is much higher. So this is our experience from the city of Mumbai. And I think when we are there in the writing of the process, we just completed in this week, every day we are 1 or 2 patients from either of the centers. So I think we will, especially general hospitals where they have much pediatric population and the pediatric intensive care units.
Now, madam, I want to ask, how many pediatric cases you have found classical COVID-19?
I think in Bombay, we have found around 4,500 cases of pediatrics. In fact, we got most of the data from the BMC, Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and they have 27 deaths. Actually, unfortunately, we do not know what the details of the deaths from the other children. In our these 23 patients, we had only 1 death. But the remaining deaths in pediatric population, it's really difficult because there were like multiple other government hospitals, some the private nursing homes, and it was difficult to get the data. But these 23 patients we have, we have a common format how we looked at them: clinical parameters, investigations, everything. In fact, some of the children, they have very high cytokine stocks, and where we have to give tocilizumab in addition to our regular therapy. And as I said, almost 70% of the patients we have given IVIG with complete improvement in the myocardial function. So that's our experience from Mumbai. It may be good actually if we can get the collective data. In fact, I was trying to talk at that time when I was trying to collect the data from multiple centers from Delhi and Chennai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, but I could not get a concrete data from multiple centers. So I tried to get it from Bombay, but in a 1 month span, we got like 23 children who were completely evaluated as well.
What about remdesivir in pediatrics? Have you used?
We have given in the elderly children remdesivir as well.
These are the patients with just COVID or with COVID, this PIMS?
These are the PIMS. And we include this WHO criteria: either they have antigen positive, antibody positive, either of the close family members, especially parents positive. So these were the 3 things WHO criteria has. So we have included either of the thing. And to be very specific, I just tell you about how many 9 out of 23 patients had PCR positive and 7 had antibody positive. And the remaining patients have a close family member which was positive. Until that time, I think last month, we also didn't have antibody tests available in Mumbai. And all this, the recent one only had this antibodies which are positive. And some of them have very classical, the rashes which otherwise we see in Kawasaki, the involvement of the lips, the strawberry charm, the lymphadenopathy, the rashes over the palms, very classical, just like what we see otherwise. But as it was discussed, most of these children are elderly, above like 7 or 8 years of age, what we otherwise would see in Kawasaki. We never saw any aneurysm. There was significant dilatation. We had criteria for defining coronary artery dilatation. Maybe it was very early in the disease process where we did not see any significant aneurysmal dilatation. The Z-scores were just +3 or something like that. And all of these coronary arteries came back to normal after IVIG.
Madam,
our experience from Mumbai.
Madam, I have a question. Are you giving remdesivir routinely to all these pediatric patients?
No. We don't give remdesivir routinely actually.
So, madam, what is your selection criteria for the remdesivir?
Actually, this is usually, but as I said, I'm not the king of management of the Kawasaki. This is COVID in pediatrics because they have a infectious disease which is controlled. Dr. Tanu Singhal will be going on. So, completely they decide depending upon so that who are like likely to be poor, they come in the ICU and has things like features, then we get involved in all these things. But now who comes with this PIMS, we definitely looked at the heart function, dilatation, coronary involvement in all. I think we need to like have a follow-up of all these patients, but by the time of discharge, most of the coronaries come back to normal.
Dr. Sagar is here. I think he should make some comments about that.
Sagar, unmute yourself.
Hi, sir. Yeah. Hello.
So what is Bangalore, Sagar?
Fortunately, none so far, sir.
Yeah, so
I have personally not seen any case. And so we are seeing COVID positive, I think, children, but I haven't personally seen anybody with a PIMS. But I think the surge in Bangalore has started only this month, so maybe we must anticipate in the coming month.
Yeah, that's what I feel. Once you like peak, we also initially did see Mumbai. Well, Mumbai peaked a lot and then plateaued in that particular phase. After 1 or 2 months of peaking, we started seeing many cases. So maybe a city like Bangalore, which are picking up now, maybe they see this kind of a presentation after a month or so.
Yeah. But
my one concern here is that if we label both antibody and PCR negative patients as PIMS, maybe we would end up overdiagnosing. That is my concern.
See, but if you see this as a criteria, even they have said even the close contact. That also is one of the things which need to be considered.
Again, I think
that is a very, I do agree. That is very subjective. That is a very subjective kind of a thing. Close contact with the. Because we have children who are positive by PCR, but the parents are negative, So it's little difficult.
Yeah. So I think because now everyone is getting aware of this condition, as long as we have one of the tests positive or immediate family member being positive, I think we are quite justified. But then even the otherwise presenting people who present as toxic shock syndrome may be labeled as PIMS, and because then they would also respond to IVIG.
Yeah.
That is my concern with this entity.
Yeah, and as Kawasaki, we don't see such a significant myocardial dysfunction, hemodynamic compromise. Very rarely see in Kawasaki, that's the way we see it. And these cytokine storms also we don't see in male. We have very high levels of D-dimers, interleukin-6 and ferritin levels in all these patients.
Labeling cases like that actually will decrease the threshold to refer for tertiary care facility, and everyone will be aware of that condition.
Yeah,
but possibly under the certain circumstances, it will be a little better to overdiagnose rather than underdiagnose.
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
My concern is only with the label, because I think if such a patient comes, we most often would end up giving IVIG even if it is a toxic shock syndrome. But I think once we collect more data, we would probably become more wise, and it is a good call that we should do a data collection across India.
Right,
that's
very important that we should have a common format how the data needs to be collected and the children need to be evaluated, so that at the end we can come with some kind of a consensus statement.
Definitely, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable inputs. So I think
in Guwahati also we are getting COVID-19 positive children, but none with this inflammatory syndrome, hyperinflammatory syndrome. Yet.
Rupa will start, we'll be seeing more of them once we peak. After we peak, we'll start be seeing more of them, I think.
Yes, sir. Yes. Maybe in August.
So now I think let us go over to, we have a lot of questions from the participants who are looking at this, who are following us up. So I think the first question is from Mihir. Dr. Mihir Shorkar has asked, how will you differentiate septic shock from KDSS early? From Kawasaki disease shock syndrome, as KDSS may not present with classic features and myocardial dysfunction is common in septic shock. So, yes, Mihir, KDSS, but usually you see this, KDSS usually starts, what I have seen the children, it starts suddenly. This babies, these children usually suddenly develop this Kawasaki disease shock fever, and they suddenly go into shock. Otherwise, well, children without any other infective features, with the features of infection. And again, if you look at the blood parameters, the KDSS patients, they have usually a high amount of they have thrombocytosis, neutrophilic leukocytosis. Septic shock, occasionally you may not have that much of thrombocytosis. So it's again a clinical call sometimes. And then if you look at the orientation of the rashes, a septic shock usually have a periorbital, that erythema and redness. But in Kawasaki, you know that it's the lips that are very, very commonly involved, the redness of the lips. So, and then if you give the IVIG, even in septic shock, I think you can give IVIG, but definitely majority of those patients are very sick patients in the intensive care. So everyone gives the broad spectrum antibiotic coverage along with inotropes. And if the KDSS patients, there's a fabulous response to the IVIG. I think Amitabh, we would like to say something regarding
this? From that's exactly, except the fact that from the clinical ground, the KDSS patients are a little bit younger in age, compared to the septic shock. The septic shock patients tend to be a slightly higher age group. The KDS patients, the patients who are presenting with Kawasaki disease shock syndrome are usually less than 1 year. They are usually, but there can be variations. And also, since they present with a mainly cardiogenic shock without a prior long history, so we can find that the cardiac markers are slightly more elevated in this group of patients. For example, if you take the NT-proBNP and the TROP-I test, these will be slightly more elevated in this case. Like in a septic shock, you can get these one, but they are a little bit later on. So if you take the cardiac panel like TROP-I, LDH, and NT-proBNP, these will be much more marked in case of KD shock syndromes. And obviously, the signs and symptoms of KD, as it depicted, like the lymphadenopathy, the congenital redness and all, these all be much more marked in KDS. These are the clinical features, and on the laboratory grounds, these are more.
Dr. Saji Philip has asked differentiation from COVID and COVID-like presentation. I think we have already covered that. Dr. Basudev Patru has asked, if the patient comes late, would IVIG work or should treat with aspirin only? No. You give IVIG as I said, if the patient is still in the inflammatory phase. Even if the patient is coming late, the patient has fever, the patient has elevated CRP, or if the patient has an aneurysm at presentation. Late presentation, but the child has an aneurysm, go ahead and give the IVIG. It can do a world of good, and aspirin only is not the treatment. Shomik Basu has asked, in the 2-month-old infant with shock syndrome and KD, did you administer IVIG? Yes, definitely, Shomik. We administered IVIG. The same question, how effective is IVIG if administered after 10 days? That 10 days wasn't arbitrarily fixed up. So you remember you are treating an inflammation. So if the inflammatory parameters continue to be high, and if the child presents with aneurysms, you should hike up the management. Not only give IVIG, presently everyone treating KDs usually give infliximab or steroids along with the IVIG. Dr. Saji Philip has a question for Amitabh. Can we give low molecular weight heparin for children for 1 year, then to oral in infant and young children since risk of MI is higher below 1 year?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can give. In fact, it is given in infants and even in neonates. It's well done. Only thing is the blood parameter to be monitored is anti-10A, which is not universally available. So we try to give it, but it is very safe medication in cases, for example, if the child has any GI disorder or has any gastroblast, and the aspirin is contraindicated. Example, in our doctor sending patients also. In many cases, there you can use low monomolecular weight heparin. It is given twice daily, and the dose is in lesser dose. For infants, you need a little bit of higher doses because the presence of non-recurrence factor and the other proteins are a little bit more in infants. As you go up on the age, the dose actually comes down. But it can be very, very safely used.
I would like to add, in fact, it's better to give a low molecular weight heparin because giving warfarin and maintaining that that INR is almost next to impossible because the classic INR.
The absorption is very erratic.
Very erratic. So even we have patients. We had a 2-month-old baby who was on low molecular weight heparin for almost 3 years. We teach the parents to administer the low molecular weight heparin, and usually the acceptance is and the monitoring is much more better. So Sagar has asked this question already, that overdiagnosed we have dealt with. Now Mihir has asked, was viral etiology for myocarditis excluded? Mihir, these patients had very high CRP, disproportionately high CRP. So usually in other viral myocarditis, we do not really encounter this high CRP. Acute presentation under the present circumstances with the classic features described elsewhere, and this high CRP, and then the response to the classical, almost fabulous response to IVIG. No, we did not look at other viral etiology in the 2 patients that we described. Professor Apurva Ghosh has asked, Kawasaki disease following acute human adenovirus infection, sir. Definitely Kawasaki, a lot of data is that Kawasaki can be post-infections. A lot of infections has been described in association with Kawasaki. In fact, I think there's a paper from Sick Children Toronto that said that almost 10 to 30% of patients of KD some associated infection. So of course can be associated with Kawasaki disease, and Kawasaki is now maybe a syndrome. So a lot of people say that it may not be just a disease, it's a syndrome. In fact, there's just recently a paper from Professor Ravelli that Kawasaki disease or Kawasaki syndrome. Mihir Shorkar has asked again, patients resistant to IVIG and steroid, how will you select biologics among infliximab, anakinra, tocilizumab? Now, anakinra is unfortunately not available in the country. So I think usually people are using tocilizumab. I think, in fact, Dr. Snehal also mentioned about tocilizumab. But if someone has significant aneurysms, then possibly the choice will be infliximab, because the tocilizumab was used in some of the trials in Kawasaki disease, IVIG-resistant Kawasaki disease. Usually the response to fever was excellent. The children became afebrile very rapidly, but on follow-up, they had much more giant aneurysms. And that was the reason that tocilizumab was discontinued as a drug for IVIG-resistant KD. So if you have significant aneurysms in this patient, the drug of choice will be definitely infliximab, but tocilizumab in all the other patients. Dr. Abhijit Mukherjee, why MISC2 occurs in older children? Suparna, will you be able to say something regarding this? Why it occurs in older children?
So what from the literature, what I gathered is that younger children, the ACE2 receptors in the nasopharyngeal pathway, they do not reach a level of maturity. And you need these receptors for the virus to bind on them and enter into your system. So that is, I think, is the reason for explanation that why the younger children, because of the immature receptors, they actually do not get such florid things manifestations. It is the older children, the adolescents, where the receptors have matured. That is, I think, the reason why the older children are having this compared to the younger children. I don't know the view about the other panelists. Bruno, you want to add something?
No, madam, exactly the thing what you have explained, you have told. So a C2 receptor, which is a receptor for the virus,
yes,
that's in the bronchial wall. So that is very important. So that's underdeveloped.
Dr. Pal had a question. Dr.
We will go to that. Ansar Ali, it is for you. Timing of live vaccine in KD patient treated with IVIG and steroids?
Okay. Actually, main concern is the measles, mumps, and varicella vaccine. So usually we advise these live vaccines after 11 months of giving IVIG. Kill vaccines we can give without any problem. And for other live vaccines, I think no any problem. But only concern is the mumps, measles, and varicella.
Dr. Abhijit Mukherjee, has asked tocilizumab or infliximab, which one is better? I think we have already addressed that. Dr. Amoljyoti Dasgupta, any risk stratification necessary in KD for IVIG resistant? Yes, sir. There are a lot of scoring systems. The Japanese, mainly Japanese, you have the Kobayashi score, you have the Sano score. So there are a lot of, we personally at our center, we use the Kobayashi scoring system, but the scoring is accepted in the Japan population. Outside Japan, it is not accepted universally. In fact, one of my PGs is doing a thesis on that, whether this Kobayashi scoring system applies to IVIG resistance in our population. So hopefully by some time we'll be having the results. What is the reason for large number of patients curiously presenting with acute abdomen in PIMS? Suparna, will you take up this? The reason for this acute abdominal presentation?
So maybe this is, I think, because of the widespread vasculitis. Along with the other system, you also are having GI vasculitis, there is bowel ischemia. So basically, because I think because of this reason only you are having this acute pain at the GI vasculitis, the bowel ischemia.
Possibly, yes.
Yes.
And then he has also asked, is cytokine profile like IL-1, IL-6, TNF be a part of investigation for PIMS? When do you look for it?
No. I think you do not need to do routine IL-6 in these patients. CRP itself is a well marker for IL-6. And elevated CRP is a well indicator of your high IL-6. You do not need to do IL-6.
Many of the issues can be well taken after say 2-3 months because we do not have robust data on it. Now it is we are learning. So still data are incomplete.
Absolutely.
So
why there is abdominal, I think it will be clear after
that would be one of the reasons which I think.
A CRP is definitely one of the good things. You can do a ferritin, but if someone is willing to do an IL-6 in West Bengal, instead of childhood health is there, we are good IL-6 at a very reasonable rate.
What is your cost per IL-6?
I think it's around 500.
Oh, very cheap.
It's not very expensive.
Okay, yes. Quite cheap. Cheaper than ferritin, I think. Cheaper than ferritin, isn't it?
So we always try to give
package. Ferritin IL-6 package.
So and a good service at a.
Okay, thank you for the information.
So Dr. Shamar Paul has asked that in patients suffering from post-COVID hyperinflammatory syndrome, when should tocilizumab be used? Take this up.
Thank you, sir, for the question, and a very good evening to you, sir. So I think that the children who are having refractory illness, having hyperinflammation, you have fever, you have refractory shock, not responding to your inotropes, in spite of giving IVIG steroids, the call is for biologics. And since in our country we do not have anakinra, we have to do with tocilizumab, sir.
Yeah, it is a third agent after IVIG and corticosteroid.
Dr. Devang Pandya has posted, I think, let me read it out. As we know, CRP is a surrogate marker of IL-6. I came across one patient 6 years with classical KD with CRP of 180, ESR 49 with highly elevated NT-proBNP, D-dimer and PCT. He responded to IVIG clinically dramatic but developed aneurysms. I think there's a aneurysm in the RCA, CRP reduced to 18, ESR to 89, IL-6 and GT 5000. Child clinically stable now. My question is, of course, IL-6 in KD COVID patients, so that we have, I think we have answered that you need not do routinely IL-6 because another thing is that IL-6 can be variable because a lot of centers give different results, but a much more stable report is the CRP and the ferritin. He says that I came across 14 such COVID KD patients during the last 2 months. 50% investigations were not done. One RT-PCR positive, one antibody positive. But 50% children were from COVID area or containment zones, predominant GI and liver symptoms. So I think everyone is coming across this predominant GI and liver involvement and may not be positive RT-PCR. So thank you, Devang, for sharing your data. Dr. Bhupendra Manocha has asked, why is it that this hyperinflammatory condition is not affecting children of younger age? I think we have already dealt with that. Abhishek has asked, Dr. Abhishek Prodhar from Apollo, do these PIMS patients have any flu-like symptoms prior to the onset of this Kawasaki-like symptoms? If yes, by how many days? Abhishek, in the 2 patients that we have encountered, no, we have not encountered any flu-like symptoms. The child that I first described, this 8-year-old girl, she presented with fever, vomiting, and loose motion. She went on to develop the rashes on the second day of fever. And sick children with SaO2 less than 94% shock, moderately sick, PCR positive should need remdesivir. So this is a statement from Dr. Kaul. Dr. Kaul has said that when you should administer remdesivir, so he says that sick children with SpO2 less than 94% in shock, moderately sick, and PCR positive. So these are the indications of remdesivir according. So that is what he states. Then Anjali Dasgupta has asked, in the second case of panel discussion, methylprednisolone was started along with IVIG. COVID antibody test was negative. Could IVIG be started alone? Yes, sir. Definitely, you can give IVIG alone, as in the first case. But it was the clinician's decision. I think the intensivist, since he was giving not the 2 grams per kg, he was giving 1 gram per kg. He decided to give methylpred along with the IVIG.
So in addition to this, I want to add one point.
Yes.
In a recent recommendation from CDC and the Royal College of Pediatrics and Childhood, they have also added pulse methylprednisolone along with IVIG in patients with high risk factors like infants, carry shock syndrome, CRP more than 130, and coronary Z score more than 2, and presence of aneurysm and ASEAN rates. Here they have added pulse methylprednisolone.
The shared trial, isn't it? The shared trial.
Yes.
The shared trial.
Dr. Vishwajit Pratap has asked, so what is refractory KD and its management? So, Dhruvjyoti, yes, go ahead.
So, after giving IVIG, if there is persistent or recrudescence of fever within 36 hours of completion of IVIG infusion, and that can occur within 7 days after that, this is called resistant KD, IVIG resistant KD. So here we have several treatment options nowadays. We can give either second dose of IVIG, or we can give infliximab, we can give steroid, several options. But as Priyankar sir has told, we are also using infliximab in this type of cases for last 3 years.
Yes. So I think I think in fact PGI Chandigarh is also using infliximab. I think, isn't it, Dhruvjyoti?
Yes. We have first reported that one.
Yeah. So I think that was the first published paper that we have a new kid on the block. So infliximab paper.
Yes.
We have a new kid on the block, and in fact at our center we have almost used infliximab in 30 patients, and they have all responded very well. Keeping our fingers crossed, majority of them, they became afebrile within 24 hours of initiation of infliximab. By 48 hours, the CRPs came down.
So that was dramatic change in the clinical picture, including reduction of coronary artery size. That I can, And we have used 11 cases till now, and all have good response. One giant coronary aneurysm has reduction in the size. That was very promising. Yes. But I don't know why this, after lockdown, we are getting very less cases. Last year, during March to July, there are almost 25 cases we have diagnosed with KD. But here now we are getting 3 cases of it during this last 4 months.
No, we have at least 12 to 13 patients of KD since March. So in our center, KD, all these patients, RT-PCR was done, RT-PCR was negative. They were classical Kawasaki disease. So we had at least 12 to 13 patients. And regarding your experience with infliximab and the reduction of aneurysm, in fact, we also have similar experience. We had a baby, 6 weeks old baby, who had presented with fever following the 6 weeks DPT vaccination. And the child went into shock, was being treated as a septic shock, but the fever was not subsiding. The child came out of the ventilator, but the fever continued with raised inflammatory parameters. And then That was the reason that I got involved actually. And then what was very striking was the platelet count. This baby always had a thrombocytosis. So if you are suspecting a baby in shock, thrombocytosis is usually never a feature. So it's usually the platelets are low or normal. So if you look at a baby with shock and thrombocytosis, they definitely please think of Kawasaki. And the baby had giant aneurysms on echocardiography. And we gave infliximab. The parents were a little hesitant, but still we went ahead. And at 6 months, all the aneurysms have regressed. They have become normal coronaries. And it was unbelievable, but yes, definitely. And in a lot of patients also, we have seen the coronaries really regressing. And anyone would like to add anything else?
Priyanka, are you using infliximab as a first-line therapy?
No, never. We always, it's an add-on drug. Always post-IVIG. Never as first-line therapy.
I think, Priyanka, there was one case from PGI where they used infliximab upfront.
Yes, I know. I think, but that was because of some economic
affordability issue.
Yes. Because infliximab, that 5 grams, 5 mg per kg infliximab dose. So if you give the equivalent amount of IVIG was becoming a little more expensive.
Yes, absolutely.
So they have one experience.
Yes.
But usually the recommendation is post IVIG. Dr. Pulakole has asked, what's the mean interval between suspected COVID infection and the development of PIMS? Suparna, I think you can answer that.
Yes, so what the other countries noticed was that after 4 to 6 weeks of the peak in that country, the PIMS actually was being noticed in children. Maybe that time was taken for the children to develop the immune response, I think. So all the children there, like in UK, Italy, they first peaked, and then after they saw the cases with the adults peaking, after 4 to 6 weeks later on, the symptoms started developing in children. Maybe because of the immune mechanism that took time to develop.
Yes. And Pulak has also asked another question. How much does tocilizumab cost? So tocilizumab, now if considering the present scenario, it's 8 mg per kg that you're giving. I think tocilizumab comes in vials of 6. It's vials of 80 and 200. Yes, so 80 and 200 mg vials are available. Of course, they have launched the subcutaneous tocilizumab presently, but that is not what you are concerned about. I think you are more concerned about the IV tocilizumab, which comes in vials of 60 and 200 mg. And remember, the vials should be costing, the 80 mg cost usually around 10,000 as far as I remember.
16,000 is the 200 mg, isn't it, Priyanka?
Yes, something like that. It's around 10,000 and 16,000.
Can I add, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please.
I think it is easy to remember 80 mg, 200 mg and 400 mg, and roughly it would be 6 to 8,000 for 80 mg and around 12,000 to 14,000 for the 200 mg and around 30,000 for the 400 mg.
Thank you, Sagar.
Thank you, sir.
Acha. Sanjay Shahu has asked, are Asian children more susceptible for hyperinflammatory syndrome like KD?
No, this was the contrast. Like PIMS was being more seen in the Africans, Afro-Caribbeans, and the Hispanics. Unlike the KD is more seen in East Asian ancestry children. This was a stark contrast with the KD. I don't know why. Maybe because of ethnicity, genetics. I cannot explain.
So all these are, I think, some genetic factors ultimately involved. in fact, Kawasaki is also possibly having some genetic basis.
Yes.
So Dr. Hemant Kumar has asked, what's the role of COVID antibody test in acute stage? Shupon, you take it up.
Acute stage, like if you do the antibody testing within the first week, the result will be 30% positive. Ideally, it should be done from the second week. Second week, the result comes about 70%, and then till third week is the maximum. Beyond that, I don't know. But before 7 days, it is not advisable to do an antibody. You should better go for an RT-PCR. This is the same thing with every viral infection. The antibody actually takes 7 to 10 days time to appear.
So even if you're antibody negative, you can repeat the test after a month.
Yes, you should.
You should repeat the test after
Yes.
a month. Okay. Dr. Mihish Sharkar has asked. Mihir is the intensivist.
Yes, she is.
Intensivist.
Yes.
So, giving IVIG and steroid in patients with less severe spectrum of disease can lead to immune paralysis and secondary infection. So, I think he has made a comment. Any one of the panelists would like to take it up?
Mihir, what do you want to say? Like in the acute stage, when the child is coming to you with severe inflammation, you have to start some immune modulator. And I think IVIG would be the initiator, followed by steroid if it doesn't respond. First, we've got to save the child, then we think of secondary infections.
And IVIG always remains a safe alternative.
Yes,
If it
I
is
think
affordable,
so.
it's very safe.
Mihir, are you there? You can unmute yourself if you want to add some comments.
Yeah, just I want to ask if the patient have just borderline coronary artery dilatation and inflammatory markers is raised, but the myocardial function is reasonably good around 50%, 40%, and just borderline coronary artery dilatation. Should we go for IVIG steroid upfront or just wait for wait the patient for next 24 hours? If the patient is going to deterioration, then go for the steroid and IVIG. That's my question.
Mihir, not upfront. We are giving IVIG first. We are trying with IVIG first, and if there is no response, then we go on to give steroids. But I think in such a scenario with the LVF around about 40 to 50%, and having features of developing shock, impending myocarditis, I would definitely like to treat the
No,
patient.
patient is not in shock. Patient is a lower spectrum of disorder, not so severe. Patient has just myocardial function is just borderline, just 40 to 50% ejection fraction, borderline dilatation of the coronary arteries, and CRP is raised. But patient fever is there, but patient is not hemodynamically unstable. In this group of patient, should we go for this IVIG steroid?
So I would definitely start with IVIG, Mihir. Priyanka, do you have any comments?
Definitely, if you think your diagnosis is PIMS, because this is a hyperinflammatory syndrome, you need something to bring down the inflammation. And definitely IVIG should be the first choice, plus minus steroids. Definitely, you can add steroids, you may not add steroids. Like the patient that we first described, we gave just IVIG. We waited for the child. We thought that we'll administer steroids if the child is not improving. Sagar, would you have some comment? Dr. Sagar Bhattar?
Sagar, please unmute yourself.
Yes. I would absolutely agree. There is, according to me, there is no debate on IVIG because, as you said, even sometimes in septicemia we end up using it. So even if there is a doubt in the diagnosis, there is no denial on the role of IVIG. And I would also say, if we are convinced that there is myocarditis, we will also keep a very low threshold of adding steroids in that setting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. Somnath, hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Somnath has asked something, I think. Just a congenital immunodeficiency, any form, can they present with KD, or some form are resistant to any experience of KD in immune response? I think Sagar is the best person to take up this. So, Sagar, again, I would like to
tell you is, what I can tell you is we have seen patients of Kawasaki disease in patients with X-linked A-gamma globulinemia. So it's a disease where B cells are completely absent. There are no immunoglobulins, and these patients have developed Kawasaki disease. So we can probably hypothesize that B cells are not the primary drivers, and it is probably a T cell mediated disease, or it is an innate immune response that is responsible for Kawasaki. So yes, patients with XLA have developed Kawasaki disease, but I don't see any immunodeficiency that predisposes to Kawasaki disease. Hope I am clear.
Thank you. I don't think we have any more questions. I think just a minute. Dr. Hemant Kumar has asked 2 more questions. To recommend IVIG justified in COVID, I think per se it is not given in COVID patients, as far as I know. But if you definitely think of the PIMS, it is the first line of treatment, IVIG, in patients with the COVID-associated hyperinflammatory syndrome. And Dr. Hemant has also asked,